But yeah, there's even somebody that's ostensibly probably on their side for like 90% of this shit about like their talking points, what they say, etc. Even he is reviled because of pointing something like that out. Like the academics, he's not even talking about like gay people. He's not talking about your garden variety queer. He's talking about the academic side of it, the intellectuals, the elites, etc., and what their preoccupation is with, and how they always make defenses for it and they don't speak out against it. Anyways, so now we're going to have a whole bunch of fun. We're going to be watching an episode of Donahue, the Phil Donahue Show from 1990. This lady, Judith Resiman, Dr. Judith Resiman, was on this show back in 1990 trying to expose kind of Kinsey's research. This is how long this has been going on. People complaining about what we're gonna find out is called Table 34, which is the one with the kids. She's out there trying to, I guess, expose this information, make it more widely known, because Kinsey was kind of celebrated. He was a pop culture figure. I think he had kind of come back in vogue sometime in the 80s in terms of just his popularity, like being kind of a beacon for the Coomers. And yeah, so this should be interesting. When was the last time you watched an episode of the Phil Donahue Show? My goodness. You know what? I'm going to say the Donahue vibe, the Donahue jam, that might take top spot. You know, we got the Kevin Samuels vibes, we got the Kinsey jam, the Kinsey can jam, and now we got Smooth Donahue. I'm liking this Donahue. I'm liking it. He's got it. This is some smooth, sexy shit. You know, this is something like Sade would sing to. Remember Sade? You remember that song Smooth Operator? It's very close to that.
It's fundamentally all the information on children is based on sexual abuse of 317 infants and children from 2 months of age to 14 years of age, the majority of them, in fact, under 10 years old.
Yeah, but you can't prove that, Dr. Resiman. And those who preside...
You can't prove that. There's just a table that has all of these things laid out, but you can't prove that these kids were abused. It's so weird to see people just come out in defense of it. They just do anything they can to defend the honor of the venerable Dr. Alfred Kinsey. Trebling says that Donahue vaporwave aesthetic. Ooh, that's the right way to put it. Those were the magic words I was looking for.
At the Kinsey Institute today are appalled at the some might say libelous charges that you make, and not only about the work done by the late Dr. Kinsey, but also by some who follow him. We should also tell you that Indiana University...
Some who follow him, like they're part of a fucking religion. Like, come on.
A very proud conservative institution of higher learning in America stands by this institute, and most of the people who survive today, who worked with Dr. Kinsey, identify him as an honorable man who abused nobody, touched nobody, and not surprisingly, was a subject of controversy on the occasion of the publication of his book about men in 1948 and women in 1953. You can't prove that he abused children.
I think that the book is...
No, his work product, the thing that he collected, was from abused children. This is like the equivalent of somebody like, you know, for research purposes, buying child pornography.
Establishes that there was abuse that took place without any question, and he admitted that. He admitted that in the book. And if in fact it wasn't true,
what did he say that admitted that?
Oh boy, do I wish. He said he described 9 technically trained men. He called them technically trained men who he said were sexually stimulated. He said they had had sexual relationships with young boys, and that they were the source of all of his data.
Right.
He described screaming and fainting and convulsions. He described children who were striking what he called the partner. That was the man,
right,
who was abusing the children. And then he drew from that.
Yeah, some of the kids fought back, and that's included in the study. And this fucking smiling cunt, this fucking silver-haired bitch, is just like, well, you, so? Right. Trellick says, all leftist boomers feel like they owe that old perv for making girls more loose so they could get laid, basically. Hey, listen, all references available at louderwithcrowder.com. Yeah, I totally buy that.
Conclusion himself, Phil.
Yeah,
he drew from that conclusion himself that the children enjoyed the experience. That's blaming the victim. You know what that is.
This audience, you are entitled to have me identify my own bias here right at the beginning.
Okay.
I admire what the Kinsey Institute does. I am personally
Trebling called it. I admire it. Why?
familiar with its director and have worked with her, and she has made a very important contribution to a series that I was proud to have my name on in 1986. So
the fix is in, boys and girls. The fix is in. Donahue is the shock trooper of the Kinsey Institute.
We're on the Meese Commission on Pornography.
No. Sorry, Phil. That is as accurate as their information is. I was not on the Meese Commission on Pornography. And if their research is as accurate as that, then you have some idea of where I'm coming from and the fact that we can prove what we have to say.
I wrote a book on the Meese Commission, Phil.
Philip Noble, you're a writer for The Village Voice, and you're a former Penthouse editor. Let me stand back from you.
Former Penthouse editor. So let me stand back from you. I don't want to get AIDS. You fucking coomer. You writing coomer. So to give a sick-ass rebuttal, here's an editor from Penthouse. Crunk the Madman says, Donahue is a piece of shit. I remember my mom leaving his this big write-up about him laying on the kitchen table as a kid. There's some dark shit out there about him. You know, that would not surprise me if he's got some skeletons in his closet, especially considering how close he was to the people that run something like the Kinsey Institute. It's all coming together. But, you know, honestly, I don't really know much about him. I remember like a few years ago, him and his wife were like on some sort of news tour. Maybe they were selling a book or something. But I remember vaguely watching the show when I was growing up, like if my mom was watching it or something in the early 90s. But that's really all I know about him.
What accounts for my rare error here in suggesting that she was a member of the Meese Commission?
Judith Resiman testified before the Meese Commission, but like everybody
Yeah, testifying is not being a part of it. You're not part of the commission.
else who has heard and evaluated her work, it was rejected. The Meese Commission refused to cite Judith Resiman in its report.
As wrong as what
In
you
fact,
just said. It's incited in the report. I mean, you know, people say things without any validity.
Let me
and
ask you
say
more
we
specifically.
don't have validity.
Dr. Resiman, do you think homosexuality...
So he's not going to address that. She's directly saying, like, this dude is lying. He's lying about me. And he's lying to try to discredit me and saying that I'm a kook. Like, come on, dude. Kronk says, my parents were leaders in the anti-abortion movement in the 80s and 90s. There's shit mom has told me that they found out about how many of the abortion doctors were into child porn and fetishes. Oh my goodness. All references available at louderwithcrowder.com. Well, it wouldn't shock me if you can, dehumanize a human being like that. If you can consider a human being less than nothing, then I'm sure you're probably into some weird shit. Crunk says antinatalism taken to the next level shit. I'm sure
is an aberration.
I think that that bisexuality is an aberration, and I think that what do you mean by an aberration?
Yeah, she's saying like they're trendy. Bisexual people are trendy, and then there's this very small amount of the population that's actually homosexual or gay. And a lot of that is because due to rewiring from abuse. We've covered this in the past, probably a while ago now. But yeah, a lot of people abused. A lot of abused people.
Abnormal.
Are you saying...
Can I ask you a question?
Well, I'd like to try and just...
All right.
Tell me your feelings.
He's like, he wants to set her up. He wants to just make her look bad. He wants to frame her in a disingenuous way. He's like, yeah, talk shit about gay people. I dare you. Crunk says, I always loved how the majority of the pro-abortion supporters were gay men and lesbians. That's kind of how it is today. Like when you talk about trans women, it's all fucking like nerd men that go hard in the paint. They're all the debate bros on the internet. It's all like, it's all nerd men that just do nothing but talk about it and debate it constantly. It's like all they do. They just defend it. They're just like, no, there's really no such thing as a woman, you know. Fucking A.
About
my feeling about homosexuality has very little to do with what I've got to say about children, although they attempt to shift it over there. Let's get back to what we're talking about, what I'm talking about. Wait a minute, Phil. I've been a child advocate all my life, and we are talking about children, and
fucking Judith Resiman coming in, taking no shit. Taking no fucking shit off of Phil Donahue, who's trying to railroad her, but he's too much of an idiot. He's too much of a fucking pussy. He's like not even good at what he's doing.
Talking about what was done to these children. The homosexuality issue is another issue which I'd be delighted to get to as we move along.
Right, but I do think it's important at least to establish. The suggestion is that you do have a bias, Dr. Resiman.
A bias? How do you mean a bias?
That you think homosexuality is somehow subnormal.
I'm saying that homosexuality does not appear.
It is subnormal. Like, technically. It's an aberration. It is an abnormality. Like, that's just basic shit. And especially in, like, 1990. Is that really, like, a huge controversial thing to say? I mean, nowadays, it doesn't matter if it's fucking true or not. Like, and that's not making a value judgment either. It's just, like, stating a fact. Trelling says, it's funny how nearly every gay guy has a story about their first sexual experience being with an older man, yet they all swear there is no correlation between gays and pedos. Oh, yeah. I don't know if it's, I did an episode a long, long time ago. I think it's called Proud. It got taken off of YouTube. I don't know if it's on Odyssey. But there was a bunch of dudes, like this guy went undercover to do undercover journalism and went to like a bunch of gay bars and just kind of, I think he was a gay guy, and he wanted to learn more about like what turns people gay or when people realize they're gay or their first gay experiences or whatever. And like 90% of the people describe being abused as a child, because it's just a known thing. It's just an accepted part of a lot of gay culture. It's in mainstream shit. It's in mainstream stories about like the guys that write about their own autobiographies, about how they usually are involved with a much older man, like for their first gay relationship. But yeah, and then the more shocking thing that guy found out in the bars though is that those guys grew up, and then abused kids. Like he'd be like, well, what's the youngest person you've ever been with? Like there was a huge amount of them that were like 12 years old. Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff, man. Crunk the Madman says, my gay bear boss is one of the coolest, most down-to-earth guys I know, but I wouldn't get in a hot tub with him. Exactly. But that's what I mean. Like saying it's an abnormality or it's subnormal is not necessarily an insult if you're like a professional person that talks about this stuff for a living. Cato says, is having cancer abnormal? Crunk says to Cato, are you anti-cancer? Get the fuck out. That's the cool kid cub for most.
To be, as far as I know, by any means as healthfully productive for human beings as heterosexual experiences, which involve two human beings. And by the way, what do you mean by homosexuality? Are you talking about male homosexuality or are you talking about female homosexuality? Because we're talking here about two different kinds of things.
So it's an unhealthy psychosexual state. Then.
It is look, it's not. I'm not the expert on homosexuality.
But you bespeak a bias about it, and you are presiding over a book that embarrasses the
Yes, but Phil, why are you looking at the homosexual stuff? Just a minute. Why not address what? Why not address what the real issue is? The real issue is that we are saying that the Kinsey Institute was involved in the actual, that Kinsey was involved in the actual use of 9 sexual offenders, rapists, child rapists, who abused children.
Kinsey interviewed people in prison.
He interviewed people, but those were not the men who did those things to those children.
And which is something that they totally admit. They totally cop to. It's in every documentary about Kinsey. It's in the movie Kinsey. They have it. It's Bill Sadler is the guy. He's the pedo that shows up and describes to Kinsey about how many times he makes kids come and all this fucking creepy weird shit. And the movie tries to frame it as if like Kinsey is kind of appalled by it, but in the interest of science, he has no choice but to accept this man's data. Yeah. And then they kind of brush over it, but it is represented. It is said that it happens, and it is not some guy that was in jail. I think one of the guys was in and out of jail because he was obviously like a psychopath, but clearly, I mean, they clearly all were, but he was a violent psychopath. Cato says, yeah, like treating cancer is bad. Crunk says it's bad if you're an antinatalist. Crunk says, look, guys, I'm an 84th trimester abortion supporter. It should be constitutional right. Only abort at the 84th trimester. Listen, all references available at loudwithcrowder.com. Yeah, we got to get back to that. Remember, was that Australian study? That study out of Australia about like, well, you know, maybe like being able to kill children up to the age of like 2. Because they're so dependent upon their parents. They're basically an extension of being in the womb. So they don't have agency. Yeah, really nice people.
You're talking about 800. You're talking about one man that they said abused 800 kids. Come on, this is not. It's like going to a rapist and asking the rapist, how did the rape victim enjoy the rape?
It's like going to a rapist and interviewing him for the important work of determining what kind of profile is guilty of this.
So he was accusing her. He's like, you have no evidence. You have no proof. Okay, where's the proof? These guys, they were fucking taking censuses and doing interviews. Where's the proof that the people that he interviewed about abusing children were prisoners, that they were in jail? Where's the proof? Should be pretty easy to fucking materialize. Should be able to pull that up right away. Should be all very well documented, right? Crunk says, basically, if your kid doesn't work out, you should be able to punch them out at 21. Sorry, kid. And then you take that thing that Anton Chigurh uses in No Country for Old Men, the silver bullet thing to kill cows, the air pressure thing. Sorry, buddy.
It's kind of horrendous behavior so that we might avoid it in the future. Edward Eichel wants to say what, sir? You're a sex researcher and you're...
Hold on. He said, taking down these things about horrible things so we can avoid it in the future. What are they doing for prevention at the Kinsey Institute with any of that research? Again, it'd be a great question to ask old Phil Donahue here. Well, what are they doing? What have they done? What preventative measures have they done? What further research have they done in stopping this from happening, from kids being abused? It's not even the point of the fucking research that they were collecting. The data. It's just a oh my God.
Co-author of this book, Kinsey, Sex and Fraud. You feel that today's sex research has a gay bias. Is that so?
Well, I think you're sort of jumping on Judith for my part of the book. And I'd have to pose a different kind of question. Do you think heterosexuality is abnormal? For instance, is it just the inhibition of society that causes people to be exclusively heterosexual? And I am saying...
People are not exclusively heterosexual. We have a global
I'm saying
population
that
of people who are
a great majority of the population is, although Kinsey's data...
Yeah, he's like 99% of people are heterosexual. That's, I mean, you know, if you want to get some semantic. Crunk says, sorry, Jim, you've cost me and your mom too much, and you aren't going the right direction in life. Kerchunk, clean up on aisle 5.
Led people to believe otherwise, and that there is nothing wrong with heterosexuality, even though Dr. Reinisch of the Kinsey Institute's mentor, Dr. John Money, has termed obligative heterosexuality a term to suggest that heterosexuals are pathologic.
Yeah, that it's not natural born, obligative. And John Money, another wonderful researcher of the time, caused 2 guys to commit suicide as he played little weird fucking games and also abused them, by the way. It didn't just confuse those kids, he abused them openly. Part of it's just research. So that's great. But he's also kind of identifying the Kinsey scale, the nature of the Kinsey scale, that I was making jokes, but I was also being partially serious. Like having heterosexuality as 0 sends something like subconscious into your subconscious about its value because they're numbers. So when you see it go from 0 to 6, like you are automatically kind of predisposed to think subconsciously that 6 is a better number than 0. It's more valuable.
She considers him a
lie.
mentor.
Ed. Phil,
That is June Reinish's mentor, according to her in her book, The New Kinsey Report.
Poor Dr. Kinsey. Here we are, 50 years later, arguing about this guy. What did you want to say?
I wanted to say that Kinsey, Sex, and Fraud, as Mary McCarthy said of Lillian Hellman's work, is a lie. Every word in this book is a lie, even the thes and the ands.
Yeah, that's right. Judith Resiman's like, if I'm saying shit that's not true, if this is libelous, if this is slander, then sue me. That's, I think, something she has said for years, all throughout her work doing this. He's like, then fucking sue us. Clearly, you wouldn't want his name being sullied like that. You know, Phil Donahue, he's verklempt. You know, he's very emotional about this. He's caught in a tizzy a little bit. He's like, oh man, we can't even leave this guy alone. 50 years ago, man.
Yes.
In fact, Judith Resiman has spent 12 years investigating Kinsey, trying to show that he molested children. I read her book. I wrote an article about it. You know who her sources are, Phil? Kinsey himself and his biographer, Wardell Pomeroy. In 12 years of investigation, she's found only 2 people who support her contention, and they turned out to be Kinsey himself. Why? Because he admitted he did take evidence from men who had sex with boys.
Yeah, that's what she's saying. That's the claim. See, they're trying to conflate it. They're trying to say that she's saying that Kinsey directly molested children, and that's not what she's saying. She's saying he facilitated, he encouraged the abuse of children. That's the claim. The claim is not that Kinsey himself abused children. And this fucker and Donahue, they keep trying to bring it back to this shifting the goalpost to a place that is not their intention. It's not their target.
That is no crime, and she smears Kinsey with that.
Guess who's here?
No, there would be a crime. That would be a crime. You'd be like a co-conspirator. A co-conspirator, and that's why he had to do all this shit in secret. Again, I don't know how much of that was known when this interview aired or whatever, but they even talk about it again in that movie. And they talk about it in every documentary about Kinsey, is that they had to do it all very on the hush-hush, and they couldn't really talk about it. They had to have, like, these guys would, like, leave notebooks in the desert, and Kinsey's guys, one of his boys, maybe C.A. Tripp himself, would go out there and, like, dig it up. Because they didn't want, like, any actual contact with them. Because they didn't want to, like I said, they didn't want to be found to be involved.
A. Tripp, Ph.D. Well, all you did was work with Dr. Kinsey. Do I understand that?
Yes, for many years.
You knew the man personally?
Yes.
Did you call him Al?
No, I called him Proc, as most of his friends did. Short for Professor Kinsey.
We should say that
You can call me Eddie, and you can call me Al. Call me Al.
You are the author of The Homosexual Matrix, a book which got quite a positive response from...
He's like, yeah, that Penthouse guy, he loved it. He thought this was a good book.
I agree with Resiman on one point. I think we really ought to talk about the child stuff before we mix in the
Right, well, make your point,
homosexual stuff. You know, we really shouldn't go too fast there. We want to savor that because it is wonderful. It's so delicious what she says, because she says that Kinsey molested these children.
No, I didn't.
No, see again. See, they try to do. All of them are trying to do that. So it's like they've taken turns, just trying to hit at this point, and she has to be like, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I'm saying. It's so delicious. I have to savor it. Like a fucking lizard man himself. This man is part lizard.
And
No, I didn't.
take a look. I want to draw you a picture of the image. The image is that the world-famous sex researchers, or Dr. Kinsey alone, it's not quite clear, are in a room, and they hover over a young child, less than a year old, and with their fingers or a feather, that's not quite clear, they tickle the genitalia and bring this kid to orgasm, who is screaming and hollering and possibly held down by chains.
And drugged.
It's all too glorious.
Well, make your...
Like, she's like literally right there refuting this, saying, no, that's not what I'm saying, because it's clearly not what they're saying. And they just continue on. They just continue on. You know, I guess, listen, guys, sexism is real. They're like, shut up, little lady. The Coomers are talking now.
Your point, I hope that you don't. You're being sarcastic, but I want to make sure.
I didn't mean to be sarcastic.
You're saying this isn't true, that Dr. Kinsey or his colleagues did not.
If he had done any of that, I would be the first to know, because I did the photography in those days.
Didn't Dallenbach do photography?
Not till later.
Oh.
Dallenbach was my partner.
Right.
And I did the photography. I was called in on that. I was called in specifically on the items
Excuse me,
that
did you
she
do the...
What does it say? Photographed masturbation and ejaculation for Dr. Alfred Kinsey. But I don't think they didn't have pictures of the kid stuff, because again, they would get this data like all cloak and dagger style.
Photography on the sadist and the masochist that were at Indiana University, where they were dropping the hot wax on the body parts.
Let's stay with your favorite.
You did that? You did that? Okay, thank you, Dr. Tripp.
You notice here the attempt to divert, because that's...
There is no attempt. The only attempt to divert has been you and Phil and that penthouse guy. It's not an attempt to divert. She's trying to say that you're like a compromised person, and that maybe you're not the most credible person to ask about what is and isn't appropriate. Like, what things were you involved with? What were you guys doing? Were you fucking in farm animals and taking pictures?
Extremely embarrassing situation to be held responsible for what you said in print.
Right. May I ask you to sum up your grievances, please, as a former personal and professional colleague?
Again, represented again as what she has said in print, and she has denied that. I've never read the book myself. I've never read her book. So maybe it does say that, but she's saying that it doesn't. And you know what? I believe the old gal. I do. I believe her.
Colleague of Dr. Kinsey, what is going on here?
Not a single thing. Neither Kinsey nor his staff members ever had any erotic contact or any masturbatory contact with any subject whatsoever from start to finish.
Yes. And how do you explain that this woman would step forward, PhD and all, and 50 years after the facts, write a book published by a small Louisiana publishing house, which does not make it wrong. Kinsey,
look at just all the underhanded, sly, snide, petty sniping that he's doing. I mean, it's a small publisher. Probably wouldn't be reviewed on the New York Times by the penthouse guy.
Got it
and
out.
Fraud. What's going on here? Let me just put it more specifically. Not a few folks see this as another attempt by the religious fundamental right to discredit the man who tried to suggest to us, among other things, what is now accepted, I think, by mainstream America of all religious and political persuasions, and that is that sexuality is an entitlement, that it is perfectly natural, that the onset of eroticism as it happens in adolescent males and females is important to understand and welcome and receive without judgment and don'ts and naughties and fingers.
No, that's not. No, because if it's not naturally happening, you're talking about children being abused by men. That's not adolescent sexuality, dude. Where do you think this guy works?
He's nothing but a ghoul and a goblin who works at the basement.
Like, what a bizarre way to frame that. Well, the kids are naughty too. That's not. That's not what they were. I mean, I'm sorry, but if how many times does a 4-year-old come in 24 hours? Well, is that is that essential to understanding? Is that essential to understanding childhood sexuality, burgeoning sexualities? Trembling says Donahue is a boomer coomer retard. He really is. Honestly, I'm a little shocked. I'm a little shocked because I came into this with no preconceived notions about Donahue. I don't know anything about him. And I'm a little taken aback by how hard in the paint he goes. But he revealed his hand right in the beginning. He's like, yeah, I worked with these people. I work with them. I'm very proud of the work we've done, and all the paintings that we swindled, get the state and the federal government to pay for. It's great.
Shaking, And in that sense, he made a tremendous contribution.
One of her complaints is that he started the sexual revolution, which has dissolved our morality. Do I speak
Now look,
correctly?
did I just watch your...
Oh, it hasn't?
I felt chills up my spine as a dreaded ogre has come up from behind.
You could make the argument that it has. I mean, she was 30 years removed from the beginnings of the sexual revolution, maybe a little under 30. Now that we're 60 years removed from it, I think we're starting to see kind of maybe some of the problems that it wrought, how it kind of undermined the fabric of our country and the strength of the nuclear family, etc. It's almost like it was like some kind of giant psyop.
No, I got to start this off with a red alert, red alert, red alert.
And these people are the progenitors. These are the people that are fucking involved in it. Cato says, Donahue has always made me sick. And here is that Tripp lowlife that was covered with the great Gabraham stuff. Demons. Yeah. Yeah, it was actually just serendipity. I was like, holy shit, that's C.A. Tripp. That's the guy, that's the Kinsey dude. He's one of the guys that worked with Kinsey. It just happened. Just happened.
Your program the other day when we were reading about, or when we were seeing about date rape and what's happening on our campuses.
And you see Kinsey,
now, just
do
a
you
minute.
here?
Will you tell me where's one table in Kinsey's books, though he had 1,400 sex offenders, where's one table that shows anybody who was raped in 1940 and raped in 1953? No,
Right.
we have no rape. We have rapists, but we have no rape.
Yeah.
We have children screaming and crying and having convulsions. Phil, let me ask you, would you say that when you read about children striking a partner to get away, would you say that that sounds like someone who cares about those children? And would you say that we're going to care and we're going to say and by the way, I just found out that you're the guy that did that photography. It wasn't in the book. It wasn't anywhere. Now we know who did it.
I love that part.
All right, we'll stay with the children.
Does anybody have a question?
Look at that fucking ghoul, C.A. Tripp, dude. He's just, oh, yep, you got me, dude. Well, I guess you could put it in the second edition, I guess.
Nasty bastard. As soon as I pee on him, he comes.
Fucker.
Later.
Phil, you have some tables, don't you? You
Phil,
have some tables that show 24 hours
This
around
is part
the
of the
clock.
smear. Judith Resiman has found nothing that every scholar who read the Kinsey reports for the last 50 years hasn't read.
Penthouse
It is
Forum.
because of her it is because of her mind.
Yeah, nobody picked up on this before. Yeah, you think maybe there's a reason because they're all fucking degenerates and they're all like, this all abstraction to them. They're all very intellectual. They're just like, well, we don't. It's obviously not a good thing, but it's a good thing that we have the research. It's a good thing we have the research about how many times a kid can come in 24 hours. Because those are good things to know. Yeah, I mean, he's a hero, this Kinsey guy.
It's because of her mindset.
Could we see the tables?
I mean, but exactly. Like he says it's because of her mindset. So she's going to see what she wants to see. Well, you could say the same thing about all those academics and researchers. All the researchers working up at the Kinsey Institute.
Forum, he writes about positive incest. Anybody, as far as I'm concerned, who's writing about positive incest and defending the Kinsey Institute,
Holy
because
shit.
the Indians won't come here to defend them, though they...
Fucking bomb shit.
If we were to use a Hollywood term, we'd say shots fired, shots fired.
He writes about positive incest. Oh yeah, just a normal intellectual guy, just has some ideas. He's writing about stuff. Trebling says this Coomer creep that did his part to make Western civilization worse with this show. Cato says I never realized Marlo Thomas.
Though they got me off radio, and they tried to get me off all kinds of other shows.
Yeah,
They
did.
sent him.
Richard E. Vatz, Ph.D. Kindly keep your answers a little shorter, if you will, please.
I'm here to represent the non-lurid interest group.
You
Phil.
are, among other things, Associate Psychology Editor for USA Today magazine.
Magazine, not the newspaper. It's an educational magazine, right? One of the interesting things here, although I cannot adjudicate the factual disputes between the two sides on this, is that I think the Kinsey Institute...
Then why are you there? Why are you there? Just to speak broadly, be like, well, I think in broad strokes, I think the Kinsey Institute does really good work, and they're like super important, because, who else is talking about cooming? Who else is studying the art of the coon? And I think, a lot of people want to know. The world is changing, Phil. The world is changing.
Opens itself to these kinds of attacks because it makes such a strong claim to being scientific. The survey they just came out with, for example, claims to be a scientific...
Okay, I may have misjudged. I'm sorry, I did not mean to besmirch you, mustachioed man.
...measure of the basic sexual knowledge of the American people. Now, there are some questions on there that lend themselves to some kind of scientific verification, but a tremendous amount of what they do, and by the way, this criticism was also made in the 48 and 50...
because it's all like self-reporting. It's actually kind of bunk science that we would reject. We would reject it today. In fact, that's one of the big things that's going on with surveys and studies about trans people, post-op trans, etc., is that they're all self-reported. It's all self-reporting. It's not anything really scientific about it. They just kind of take them at face value and say, "Oh, you feel good about it? Cool. Looks like this was a positive experience for yet another person 6 months after their surgery."
53 studies. But it's also made now. A tremendous amount of what they do is simply not scientific. It doesn't deal with biological processes. It deals with behavior.
So what?
Well,
I mean,
Nice rebuttal, Phil. So what? Queer.
My sense is that we get into these arguments about semantics because we're made uncomfortable by the subject of the inquiry.
Oh, my God.
Let's see if there are consequences to the words we use. When you call something scientific, you are claiming that there's a certainty to it. There's also a claim that you should have a silence because people should bend to what science says.
I don't think that Kinsey ever claimed that we should be silent.
In fact,
but there's more than this has to do.
What do you think these people are doing? They're pointing at the research and saying, well, no, that's, you don't understand the research, and the research is very valid and very important, and it's everything in society has been built up from this research for the past 40 years. They are making the positive affirmation that, yes, it's worthwhile research. Otherwise, what the fuck would they be doing? What would they be doing? What would they be supporting?
This has to do with accusation of criminal behavior, which is not provable.
I'm saying that to the extent to which, and again, this is sort of throughout the Kinsey Institute work, the extent to which they claim that their work is uniformly scientific is a claim that it is not open to reasonable criticism. Kinsey himself was very intolerant of any kinds of criticism. I think Dr. Reinisch is very close to...
I kind of see him as a blood brother in that sense myself.
His biography...
Oh my God, a blood brother. Yikes.
...recommended by the Kinsey Institute book indicated he's intolerant to criticism.
Are you there, caller? I'm glad you waited.
Yes.
Good.
I have two children in that age group that you're talking about, and I just want to know, why is it so important that we find out the sexuality of children at that age?
Because sexuality begins in utero.
That is what Calderon says. What do we...
Yes, exactly. He's just referencing Kinsey bullshit. That's why. Because it starts in utero, ma'am. Kids are turned on, okay? Kids, it's happening. It's cool.
We mean everything begins in utero.
Well,
reproduction begins in utero, for crying out loud.
You don't want us to study that, then?
That's sexuality in utero?
Uh-huh.
Phil, I'd like...
Tell me you're laughing.
How are we going to study sexuality in utero?
Well, first of all, you can see the erection. That's what they tell me.
What do we mean by an erection? I've seen what they call an erection. That depends on your perception of what the
definition
definition of erection is.
It's like, we can see the erections. We can see the baby erections. What about girls, man? You're always leaving the girls out. Always going after the boys, these fucking creeps. But yeah, that's just like a biological, physiological response. It doesn't have anything to do with your actual sexuality. Trelling says, this lady on the phone is right, but her accent cracks me up. Yeah, a little bit.
Look closer.
I have questions. I don't see what the point she's trying to make is.
I want to see, buddy.
I understand that she's questioning the methodology, but I don't see the point.
Was to...
The methodology is the point. The methods by which they collected this data is the point. You fucking goober. Like, what the fuck? How could people be this confused? Are we watching the same thing? I don't know. Maybe he was in the bathroom jerking off, expressing his sexuality.
Sexuality, what Freud was to psychiatry, what Madame Curie was to radiation, what Einstein was to physics. Comes along this woman with a book saying, holy cow, E doesn't equal MC squared. We've based an entire generation of education of sexologists on Kinsey, and Kinsey was a dirty old man.
Well, see, what's wrong with that? If it's true, what's wrong with that? You know, there's an old saying that goes in the scientific world that new discoveries are made one funeral at a time, because you have to wait until the generation of people that built their work on these particular foundations, you have to wait for them to die, because they still control everything. And they are the ones that are closed-minded, and they are the ones that are not open to reinterpretation or finding new evidence. Nope. They don't want to be, because why would they want to suggest that their life work was in the wrong direction? Why would they want to do that? They protect this shit. They protect it because it's their fucking life's work. Hagberg said, Phil owns a dick, presumably. Hard-ons happen for reasons outside of arousal. Hey, man, maybe if you're gay. Tremlink says, this crowd guy's brain is as smooth as his scalp. Tremlink says, academia absolutely operates as a religion. It really does. I mean, you're kind of hearing it right here. You're hearing it. He's like, well, so many things were built from it in the past 50 years. So does that mean it's right? Are we not allowed to question the methods or the people that were involved in making these discoveries? I mean, what the fuck?
Easy. He wasn't. The guy, first of all, the guy was married once. Nuclear family kind of guy.
But Ed
comes along his pal and say, hey, no.
Yeah, what happened after, Phil? He was married once, a nuclear family kind of guy, and then he became a fucking dirty old coomer. You know, maybe it was locked inside of him the whole time. Apparently he had tons of problems with his own sexuality and repression, and it was all connected to his father and his father beating him. It was all sorts of weird shit. He was a very confused fella, you know. He himself maybe was victimized at one point in his life, and it gave him lots of problems. But yeah, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. She's saying he's a dirty old man. Phil's like, no, because when he was younger, he was married. And then what happened, Phil? Then what happened? Crunk says Phil is losing his shit. He did this a lot on the show. I imagine. Yeah, he seemed like an indignant fellow.
Nobody ever touched anybody. Nobody ever. And when he first came out with how long the erection is, how long the sperm for the ejaculation, people went nuts. And he talked about masturbation. It was 1953. Holy cow, I remember it. I was embarrassed.
Sperm, for crying out loud. Who collects sperm? From kids.
But do you disagree with
kids?
Yeah. Do you disagree with the results?
Kids don't have sperm.
So
that's
let's
a very
get
good
that
question.
straight. Kids don't have sperm. So what was he collecting? And how was he doing it? And what did he do with it once he got it?
Judith,
and
you
that
studied
was
it.
in Cordell Pomeroy's book.
Judy, you studied Kinsey for 12 years.
Why don't you care more about the children than you do about protecting the finances of the sex industry and the sex establishment?
Oh, boom. Boom. I love this lady. Trelling says, you hear about how much of zealots is in academia is with people who try to explore alternative paths in archaeology, people like Graham Hancock. Yeah, Graham Hancock, actually one of the better Joe Rogan episodes is Graham Hancock versus Michael Shermer, the editor and owner, I think, of, or editor-in-chief of Skeptic magazine. It's a pretty good podcast because Michael Shermer is so fucking arrogant. He comes in with nothing. And Graham Hancock destroys him. And even Graham Hancock will admit, he's like, well, you know, a lot of this is speculative. We're taking, you know, stories we've heard and information, and we're kind of building a narrative. He's always been pretty open about that. He doesn't even call himself like a historian, really. He's a little, you know, he's a little shifty with that, but he's posited some interesting things. Crunk says he defended a lot of crazy shit. The controversy of his show is what made it famous. This was prior to the popularity of Jerry Springer. Yes, it's like proto Springer, right? Well, I guess maybe not as much as some other people, but the toned down proto Jerry Springer.
Right, the sex industry. So, tell me about this sex industry.
May I answer?
Is there, yeah, just tell me, is there any kind of sex research that you would approve of?
We have to learn about the way people feel and the way people are, Phil.
Right.
But we cannot separate sexuality out from the rest of what we are. If we study, like psychologists had attempted to do before, if we study who we are, sexuality is only a part of who we are. It's a part of our community. It's a part of the way we interact. When you isolate, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
You also.
Yeah, she's actually arguing for what's, and this has come to bear today, where people exclusively wrap their entire identities in things like their sexuality. She's saying that's dangerous. That is dangerous to study the shit in a vacuum as if it exists outside of life. And she's fucking dead on. Crunk says Donahue was on day primetime. Yeah, I think it was just like between 3 and 5. Like I think I remember. I have a vague recollection. Trembling says, but they won't even let Hancock look at shit that he's banned from Egypt because Egyptologists are the most zealous of all archaeologists. They won't budge at all that they may have been wrong about anything. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know he was banned from Egypt. Damn.
That, the gay population makes up only 2 or 3% of the human population.
I don't even know if that was true at that time. That seems like an inflated number. Because like a few years ago, it was like 2%. Unless it just kind of stayed steady, just held its course.
Data that's coming out not only from England, but from the National Opinion Research Council, which doesn't have any connection to the sex industry, and as I understand it, is not being given any money by questionable individuals, has identified roughly 2%. I'm sorry, they identified less. They said about 1% of the population.
1%?
That's not my fault. I'm not the people who do the research. And,
Phil's just like, oh, really? Like, oh, do you have something to the contrary? You said you thought 2 or 3%, and she's like quoting a study that says actually it's closer to 1%. And he's like, oh, really? Crunk says he made a comment about her last name earlier. Don't know if anyone else picked up on that. He was either implying she's Jewish or German. Yeah, I'm not sure what she is. I mean, Reisman? Isn't that no, that's German, I think.
I believe 1% of the human population is gay.
do I believe it? It sounds reasonable. It doesn't sound unreasonable. Let me ask you this, Phil. Do you think that 10% is homosexual?
Why do they think like there's tons of gay people? I mean, this is right after the AIDS epidemic. God cleaned house, I mean, why do they think that? Oh, that's right, because the TV told people like Phil Donahue tell them so.
Homosexual. And what do you mean again by gay? When you look at the way he defined homosexual, it's not the same as what it sounds like.
Comment. I think there's about 10% of the population
Holy
that's
shit.
gay. And also
She thinks, guys. Judith Resiman is quoting a study, and this lady, she's got ideas. All references available at louderwithcrowder.com.
So, I'd like to know where you're getting all your information from.
Pardon? I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
Well, the Kinseys.
She literally fucking told them. She literally said where she got the information from. I think it's more like 10%. All of my best pals are gay. Don't you know?
He's got a profile on you too,
So
Dr.
could I make a
Reason.
point here? Over and over again, the Kinsey Institute and people like Masters and Johnson claim to be disinterested scientists. And whether or not these statistics can again be finalized, it was perceived in 1948, and it's perceived now, that the writings are very antagonistic toward those who have prejudices against certain sexual behavior, that the writings are antagonistic toward those who believe that there should be conservatism in sexual behavior. Now, those may be good values, they may be bad values, but that is not the role of a disinterested observer or researcher. That's one of the problems.
Okay, guess who thinks this is a wonderful book?
Yes.
Patrick Buchanan.
Oh, well.
Oh, Pat Buchanan. Oh, no. No, not Patrick Buchanan. I heard he was a Nazi. Trembling says, because they rely on there being more gays than there actually is for degeneracy and their agenda to be accepted. Well, it's definitely for acceptance, for sure. I mean, they just want to, they're flooding the zone. Crunk says, Phil Donahue says 10% of males are gay. How is he wrong? Electrolytes are what plants crave. All references available at louderwithcrowder.com.
But he's anti-Semitic, and I'm Jewish.
I didn't say this.
Oh, she's Jewish.
Don't get me in another libel suit now. This is herein contained is a conservative political agenda, Dr. Resiman.
Political agenda for
which
children.
makes smears and accusations against the work of a man who is acknowledged to be a giant of 20th century.
Holy shit! Who cares?
Bill, if that's true,
he took a lot of risks, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah.
As everybody do. I'm talking about in terms of reputation, misunderstanding, and all the 1940s.
Reputation, misunderstanding, all this kind of thing. When he's he's contracting pedophiles to give him information about what it's like to beat a child into submission for sex. He took chances. Crunk says, I want that book now. It might be available. I have a feeling it's probably hard to get.
Yes.
Although it could be on the Internet Archive. That's where I would check for it. On the Internet Archive, it's probably up there, especially if it's not in circulation anymore.
He was talking about this.
That's right.
And he made an enormous contribution to the understanding of who we are.
What kind of a contribution? I repeat, if I'm wrong, if we're wrong, Phil, why don't they sue me? So sue us. Sue me. They threatened yeah, sure. I'm on national television on Phil Donahue. They could win it, they'd do it.
And
what did Walter Stewart say? He also backed that up. And who's Walter Stewart? Read that.
He's a research scientist for the National Institutes of Health.
Yes, and he's been involved in fraud in science, and he is a highly reputable individual. He read this material and said this is critical material for everyone to read. I don't want anyone to believe us, Phil.
Yeah.
Not anyone. I want everyone to read it for themselves. Go out and look in their libraries. Check the Kinsey Institute.
Right. When can we begin to study sexuality, in your opinion?
What the fuck is they made this whole argument about something that it's not. They won't acknowledge the fact. It's she's talking about there's hundreds of kids that were abused to collect this research. Nobody has a fucking issue with this. They don't even bat an eyelash at this. That's what she's talking about, and they keep fucking doing this. It would have drove me insane if I was Judith Resiman. Crunk says, I bet it's banned as hate speech somewhere. Well, it's probably not banned. They probably it's not in circulation. Phil Donahue had said, it's from a small publishing house. As he kind of sniped at it. Crunk says, my collection of Civil War books that haven't been published for 20 plus years. Oh, interesting. Oh, Crunk says it's $35 on Amazon. Well, that's not too bad.
What do you mean by we? Who?
The research community, the professional community. It's a good idea to know who we are.
Community?
Is it a good idea to know who we are?
Psychiatrists, psychologists, yes, to investigate is part of the way in which they do things. Not to separate it out as if...
he's trying to make her out to be some kind of right-wing religious nut. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she's trying to do that and suggest that she just doesn't want to talk about sexuality at all. She keeps having to say the same thing over and over again. Being no, that's not how I feel. That's what you're saying I feel.
It was an atomistic piece.
In other words, don't measure erections and the time of the erection and all that stuff.
Are not removed from our brains, our hearts, our souls.
Right.
That's what's gotten us in the problems we're in the first place.
Right. You like that?
I like this. See, there's this nice conservative lady there. She's all
I like them when they conservative, but they nasty.
That's one of those right there.
You're tired of all this clinical stuff.
And he tries to smear these people as being anti-science morons. You're tired of all this science. You're tired of it. You don't want to know anything. You just want to be idiots. Hagbert says, when I invent my time machine, I'm going to force Phil onto the McLaughlin group with Pat Buchanan. Oh man, that would be something.
And you don't want to know how old a man is and what's the normal response of a man who's...
Actually, funny factoid, personal factoid. I have met Pat Buchanan several times in my life. My dad used to hang out with a guy that worked for the Pat Buchanan campaigns when he was running for president. And we'd go to a bunch of rallies and stuff. And I met him probably 5 or 6 times. I was really young, obviously. It's not like we were having conversations, but I was standing next to my dad, and I shook his hand a couple times.
42? 48? 56?
No, he wants to relax and enjoy himself.
Oh, 48 you want to know. I'll tell you what, after the show, we got charts and graphs for you. You can take them home later and show them to your husband. We're with the people who have deeply disturbed those who preside over the Kinsey Institute today, and those who step forward to say, before you swallow this whole, we should know with whom we're speaking, and not a few people who support Kinsey, the Kinsey Institute, have questioned your credentials.
Of course they do. I would if I had the investment they have.
Judith Resiman, Phil, happens to be the most repudiated PhD in America. First of all,
in America, the most repudiated PhD in America, says the fucking Penthouse guy.
Phil, sure, her work has been rejected by the Justice Department that ate their $800,000 grant.
So you're supporting Nice now.
Secondly,
this is a spokesman for Nice now.
the American, please, Judith, the American University also rejected her study.
Yeah.
The Mies Commission refused to cite it.
I don't think you've ever been published, have you, in a scientific journal?
Yes,
Never.
I certainly.
Name it.
Never.
Name it.
How about ethology and sociobiology? Is that scientific enough for you?
But did you not spend a good deal?
He's like, hold on a second, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. What do you? What?
I felt chills up my spine as a dreaded ogre has come up from behind.
That's the wildest thing about people like this, kind of like Michael Shermer talking to Graham Hancock, is that how unprepared they are, how arrogant they are. They're not prepared to actually refute any of her claims or actually have a real conversation. They're not ready for it. They don't even know basic facts about this woman. Like, they hate her. They're here to discredit her, and they don't know anything about her, like her CV, whatever you want to call it. They don't know anything about her resume.
Deal of time writing music for Captain Kangaroo?
Oh my God!
But that doesn't make you a bad person, huh?
Oh,
No.
I wrote for Captain Kangaroo. I wrote for children for years. This is part of what I've been doing for years. I've been concerned about children for years,
Yes.
from music to professionalism.
And you're proud
they've
of
been
it.
Anti-child.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
I just have a comment. I would like to know if this man from Penthouse would like to write a book on abstinence before marriage. I think that would solve a lot of problems in abstinence before marriage.
Actually, Judith Resiman's published.
Hagrid says, not just Penthouse, also The Village Voice. Dope for show listings and musician wanted back in the day, but hyper lefty and super gay. Yeah, The Village Voice, and also I think at this time he was writing for the New York Times. I think they dropped before. Because she said they introduced him as first, I think, having a byline at the New York Times because he had written about this book, and then also an editor for Penthouse.
Huntington House has done such a book. You should know the company she keeps. It's called A Reasonable, get this, Phil, A Reasonable Reason to Wait, a sexual guide for those who haven't been sexually involved, and healing.
So this guy has a huge problem that there's an abstinence book out there. Oh yeah, because that's like it'd probably be good if kids weren't like being stupid kids and getting pregnant at 14, 15. Why would we want to avoid something like that? Why would we want to do that?
For those who have. That's a book. That's a book we really need.
Phil, I've got to tell you something.
Like, if you're allowed to have the Coomer material, if that's allowed to be out there, why can't the opposite of it be out there? Come on now.
When I started this research on Kinsey, I was told there was no way I would get this thing published. There's no way the public would ever get to read what we had found out. I want to tell you something.
What?
Only in America. You're supporting Kinsey. You folks have been involved.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Here we are,
Yeah.
right? 3 cheers, because I got to tell you something. If a small publisher back in the back hills of Louisiana is willing to take that risk with the big boys,
I agree.
then we ought to give him an applause.
So the day may come when the only...
Honestly, based. Loving Judith Resiman right now.
person interested in me will be a very small publisher, if any publisher at all. So I bring no prejudice there.
Phil, I just wonder why there's so much attention to the sexuality, the little erection of a fetus, when in fact the most advanced kind of research on male-female adult compatibility is being suppressed while pedophiles are put on program committees of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sex, and that happened
but that's you're going beyond the arena of our discussion here.
Why? No, they're talking about academia.
If we were to use a Hollywood term, we'd say shots fired, shots fired.
Yeah, because you guys have broadened out the conversation. You want to call people anti-science for thinking that children shouldn't be abused to collect data. Talking about fucking erections in the fetus. Or fetal erections. Sorry. And he's like, well, that's beyond the scope of this discussion.
And I hope you don't mean to suggest that the Kinsey Institute is responsible for whatever your unproved allegation may be. Let's keep.
There is no unproved allegation. They proved their allegations. It's in the book. It's literally in the fucking book. Come on now.
This at home here.
Could I ask the Kinsey people one question? Do you agree that a great deal of what passes for research in sex has a social agenda? Do you agree, for example, that when Masters and Johnson published a book called Crisis, in which they claim, and this is a quote, that AIDS is rampant in the heterosexual community, do you agree that that bespeaks a certain social agenda on the part of people who claim to be disinterested researchers?
What?
Honestly, the same thing happened. We have a recent example of this because with monkeypox, that's what they were trying to say. Everybody was trying to say that. They were trying to say, well, obviously, like you're more susceptible to get it if you are homosexual, but plenty of straight people, they got monkeypox too. So it's not, it's not a gay thing. It's straight people, mostly straight people have monkeypox.
Why?
Well, because
why if you say that Tay-Sachs strikes Jews and other people who are born and raised in a certain global geographic area, does that bespeak a political agenda?
No, it doesn't, because in this case with Masters and Johnson and the book Crisis, it has been disavowed by every serious scientific observer in the country, practically.
As is Judith's work.
Oh.
And hers will be withdrawn.
Are you there?
Does the Kinsey Institute disavow Masters and Johnson's work called Crisis?
Yes, everybody has.
Yeah.
Does the Kinsey Institute?
We got some men who want to ask a question.
So, yeah, there's people from the Kinsey Institute there that could have answered that question. But then the Penthouse guy is going to be like, well, no, of course they have.
Yeah. I don't mean any disrespect to your panel here, but how come these so-called sex experts are always people who look like they never get it on?
Oh, shit. It had to be said. It had to be said. What's that, girls? Look at this Chad. Look at this king.
Well.
No, I am.
Yeah.
Phil.
Well. How proud your parents must be of you.
Phil. Phil, when I was coming to this program this morning, I bought 4 copies of the Village Voice because there was an article about our book. And the man who sold the magazine said to me, when we discussed the fact facts about our sex research, he said, hey, he said, my girlfriend always says, how can sex be good unless it's dirty? There's your Kinsey mentality.
Right? Oh, boy.
Oh, shit.
I like them when they conservative, but they nasty.
That's the Kinsey mentality.
Lock that kid in the
fact,
basement.
Kinsey would say it's only good when it's dirty.
Yeah, Kinsey it's only good when it's dirty, says the representative here.
It happens to be an old Woody Allen joke.
Are you there, caller?
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a comment. I'm thoroughly distressed at this rude behavior of this woman you have on this panel. I think it's
oh my God. Pedophile. We got a pedophile on the phone, guys. This is rude behavior.
It's sad in this day and age. You have such...
Because she has to shout over these assholes because they keep misrepresenting her positions or what her book's even about. How rude of her.
You have such obviously an enlightened group of other panelists on there, and they can't get a word in edgewise with her physical body language is all over that poor man next to her, wagging her finger at everybody. How would you like to have a woman like this for a mother?
Shall I be quiet?
No, not at all. All right. This is big enough. You're the corner, right? I know. I hope you don't.
I would prefer to be quiet.
Yes, I hope you don't criticize Dr. Resiman for her enthusiasm. It's something we long for and try to promote on our own program. Doesn't do any good to talk if nobody's listening.
He's like, it's called good TV, jerk.
What she should be criticized, though, for is her McCarthyism. You know what the worst thing in the
Oh my God.
her sexual...
Another legend, another myth that's recently been dispelled in the past 15 years, only to find out, like, oh yeah, there was a bunch of communists. Oh shit. Oh fuck.
McCarthyism. The worst thing in this book is not anything she says about Kinsey, who, after all, is dead and cannot be hurt. Right. She actually smears the former president of American University, Dr. Richard Berenson, a man who was caught up in child sexual abuse himself, and therefore...
Telephone sexual abuse himself.
Yes, and when he went...
Oh, thank you for making the distinction, Phil. Oh, no, he was just jerking off while talking to kids on the phone. That's totally different. That's okay.
On Nightline, he explained why he was involved in that. He said he himself was abused by a relative in a cellar as a child. So what is...
Oh, no. So does that excuse the behavior? Is that what you're saying? Like, yeah, it happens. Abuse people, you generally, or not generally, but often grow up to be abusers. Does that excuse his abuse? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, where's your empathy, Judith? He was just talking dirty to kids on the phone. I mean, grow up, Judith.
Judith Resiman do to him?
Here, let's let him make his point.
She smears him in the book, saying that the study on the childhood images in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler, the $800,000 study that was rejected by everybody in the world, she says that Richard Berenson was responsible for that subversion because he himself was a collector of pornography as was involved in child sexual abuse fantasies. How dare she smear a man who has begged for forgiveness and who has explained his own abuse like that.
He has begged for forgiveness. He was a porno addict. She's drawing a correlation here, saying, well, maybe they're connected. Maybe the people that are a little oversexed, overstimulated, and then they already have these problems, these proclivities, etc. You know, maybe there's something to that. He's like, that's ridiculous. He has asked for forgiveness. What the fuck are you talking about?
The kind of sympathy this woman shows.
Accurate with respect to
okay, I got to break you. You're not going to show dirty pictures, are you?
Well, you know, he's telling me about what's not there. You want to put it on the screen?
Probably not. I'm afraid to look myself.
Well, I mean, this is just innocent
come on.
stuff.
Huh? What's the point to be...
Yeah, what are you afraid of, Phil? This guy's saying it's fine. This stuff's fine. What are you talking about, man? Are you worried you're going to get in trouble with the FCC?
Made with this material.
The point is that Playboy and... That's just, turn the page for the photographs. Those are just the cartoons.
Well, no, I can't.
All right?
Study,
it is not a rejected
What is the point?
study.
You did a study on cartoons in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler.
No, sorry,
Holy
there
shit.
we go again.
Sure.
We did not do a study on cartoons.
What did
we
you
did
do?
A study on photographs, cartoons,
images.
And images.
Visual images.
Right.
I am
in Playboy,
corrected.
Penthouse, and
yes.
I want to tell you something. Look at the opening letter. That was used by the Simi Valley authorities. That man right there, Dwayne Tinsley, the guy who did that cartoon in the top, was arrested for child sexual abuse. He'd been sexually abusing his own daughter for years. They used our research to identify that and to get the guy, in fact, convicted.
The Kinsey
now, the daughter said that those pictures were actual pictures of what was done to her.
And why did the Justice Department
what we've got here with this man here with Nobile...
See, this is like exactly like when you find out all of these like anime artists and manga guys that are into like lolly and they do all the rape fantasy stuff over in Japan. The guys that exclusively do work in that kind of stuff for like the hentais and whatnot, and they're all trying to like pass off like, oh, these are just fantasies, guys. These are just fantasies. These things I think up. These are just fantasies, and it's just a piece of paper, just a drawing. It doesn't mean anything. It's the same fucking argument.
Who speaks about positive incest all the time, okay, in Penthouse,
all the time.
Is the defense of child sex abuse.
Imagine being the positive incest guy. Yo, can we get Phil in here? I need an article about positive incest stats.
I'm a problem because I will not defend child sex abuse. I never will, and they will support it.
I will be back in just a moment.
They are. That's exactly what's happening. We'll be right back. See, I'm getting sucked in because of the fucking, the synthwave Donahue.
Be part of the audience. Please send a postcard to Donahue Tickets, care of NBC, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, New York, 10112. Remember, postcards only, please.
Hi, I'm glad you waited. Go ahead.
Yes, Phil?
Yeah.
I'm a psychotherapist, and I used to respect the Kinsey reports, but to hear the doctor telling me how they got the data, has changed my opinion. I think it's perverse, and it should not be accepted in the name of science, and I resent the
You're a
panel.
psychotherapist?
Yes.
And whose work would you endorse on the issue of sexuality?
On the issue, see, then he broadens it out. On the issue of sexuality. We're talking about something very specific here, Phil.
I don't know anymore. It changed. I used to...
Well, it's hard to imagine that as a practicing psychotherapist, you have no one that you would professionally embrace.
Masters and Johnsons.
You like Masters and Johnson? Well, they've been victimized in the same way Kinsey has.
I mean, and I don't like the penthouse people being there. I mean...
You don't like the penthouse people being here?
I'm not a penthouse person.
Oh yeah? We got your number. Don't kid us.
Guccione's in a lot of trouble. Where are the tables, Phil? Please.
What do you want the
Phil,
tables?
Put up the tables. Let
Now
the people see them.
This will make your point, will
Yes,
it?
you let the American public look at it and let him
Judith,
pay attention to what
Judith,
those
after
tables
the tables, can we put up the lies in your resume?
Oh, a penthouse man go.
All right. See, this is a
Lies in
woman
your resume.
who could not...
Phil, I think the tables would be fair.
Let the
And her
American
resume.
public...
Judith,
let
did you
the American...
C.A. Tripp is pretty quiet over there. He's like, well, we're going to take these things out of context. I don't know if people are going to understand the subtle nuances in a child trying to beat off a man from raping them.
American public,
Let the public
see it.
think,
He
Phil.
runs from
Let
it
the
because
public-
he
let the
doesn't
public
want people
see
to
the
know.
material.
No, and I'd like
He
to see
doesn't
your
want
resume
anybody
as well.
to see it.
The tables show the number of orgasms in humans, males, I assume, 5 months to 4 years.
Nobody. What's the problem?
You've got 2 months old.
5 months
Okay. You've got one child allegedly having a climax. Where are those tables? So you've got 24 hours around the clock, 26 orgasms
Around
in
the
a 4-year-old.
Wait a minute.
You want to tell me? You want to tell me where are those
right,
tables?
show 'em, Brian.
Where are the tables?
Yeah. Well, we're going to show.
There.
Now,
All right, read
now, what is the point?
Phil, he stutters for a second. He's like, yeah. What are you getting at? What are you getting at, lady?
You
What is
tell
your
me
point?
what is the point. 5 months old. What is it? I can hardly read it. What's next to that? Number of orgasms. Oh, number of orgasms, 3. Go down to the 4-year-old. You see the 4-year-old there?
17, yeah.
There, bottom one.
Yes,
4-year-old, 26 orgasms in 24 hours. Tell me, Phil. Tell me, Phil. Does a baby sleep? Tell me, Phil. Tell me, Phil. Does a baby sleep? Tell me if this is scientific. A baby
Very
sleeps for
scientific.
8 hours?
And
You
you
tell
can't
me
get
how
the-
you get 26 orgasms for 24
Judith, well,
hours.
I don't know about that.
C.A. Tripp's like, well, yeah, we let them sleep a little bit. Kids don't sleep when they're getting jerked off. That's what Kinsey used to say.
Be able to get a word in edgewise.
Just a minute, just a minute.
Sounds like a guest for the Donahue Show.
And you know what Gebhardt said to me? You know what Dr.
What'd he
Gebhardt
say?
He wrote me a letter, which I wish you had up there too, in which he said that oral and manual techniques were used on the children. Now, Phil, I'm going to say that once more. I'm going to say that once more. And if I'm wrong, let them sue me. He said oral and manual techniques were used on those children. What American is going to defend that?
How does C.A. Tripp respond to that?
Because he's saying, oh, of course. Because, we didn't do it. We didn't do it.
She's talking about data that came from pedophiles, that he would listen to only pedophiles who were very careful, used stopwatches, knew how to record their things,
He would only listen to very serious pedophiles. All references available at loudandcrowded.com. Yeah, he would only listen to very serious, very astute, very academic pedophiles. So he didn't just listen to any old perv.
careful surveys, and these she resents very much, but they're very
So
important.
he
Kinsey
interviewed
took-
people who were known criminals. I assume, were they in prison at the time?
Oh, certainly not, but they were, in her sense, criminals because they were pedophiles, but they were trained.
Yeah, they are criminals if they're pedophiles. If they're active pedophiles, they are in fact criminals. I mean, what the fuck are they talking about? Like this laundering of this bullshit. And Phil Donahue just standing there, well, how else are we going to get this stuff?
Oh, in her
trained
sense, they were
observers.
criminals because they were pedophiles. They're
They were
raping
trained
children and they're
observers.
not criminals. You're going to defend
Nobody
that.
was raping children. What they were
What do you
doing.
call sexually, manually, and orally abusing a baby, and you're a bloody pedophile?
As for
A bloody pervert.
You know, I will say, I wish that she would have let him talk, because I want to hear him hoist himself on his own fucking petard. Well, how are you going to defend it? How do you explain it? How do you contextualize it?
You helped edit this book, is that so?
That's right.
And you are?
Dr. Gordon Muir.
Dr. Gordon, very good.
Try and bring some sanity into this program. Now, we have a guy here called Dr. Tripp.
Yes.
Who thinks that you can present valid data on sexual behavior, normal sexual behavior, by masturbating human infants for 24 hours at a time. Is that correct?
But
that's
yes,
what
somebody
Kinsey
in
claimed.
the audience.
That's what Kinsey claimed.
Yes, I'm not denying
and you're
that.
telling
I'm
me
going-
that
I'm going
Kinsey
to
came
tell you in a
across
second.
in an interview sample
Hush
of
just a minute.
5,300 people,
Hush
he
just
found
a minute and I'll
pedophiles
tell you.
who had stopwatches, just happened to have
This is-
stopwatches, just happened to
this
have
is
all
a-
that data handy.
Hush up.
All right, I'll give you a chance to respond to the gentleman's question in just a moment, if it please the court. I'm sorry, I must make this time out.
What a cliffhanger. What a piece of shit. What a piece of human shit. And he gets to continue his fucking career on national television, saying this shit, defending this shit, making clearly insane fucking statements. They had stopwatches and they took notes, so that made it okay, guys. Krunk says, "Find time for a commercial break." Yeah, you could say that. I wonder if he's going to... Let's see if he answers it when he comes back. I don't think he will. I don't think there's going to be time.
I've got an audience here that wants in here, and I have an obligation, as do we all, to give them a chance.
So see, so Phil, they either he answered and they edited it out, or Phil kind of ran interference. He's just like, no, well, we do Q&A audience stuff, and that's my obligation is to the people as a very serious daytime talk show host. We got to make sure the people are heard.
Sir.
Thank you. What was the point of the research if the Kinsey report did not follow up on the people they did research of when they were children?
See, very valid. A very valid thing. So they have these experiences, and what happens if you talk to those people later? What happened to their lives? Where are they at now? How is any of that shit valid? How does any of it mean anything? That's the craziest thing. It doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean shit. You could... It's wild. And I would say that it's probably, broadly speaking, most of that research of the time. It was probably very provocative and interesting for the public at large just to read something about masturbation habits and sexual habits. Just like Phil Donahue had kind of said. He's like, it was like 1948. This stuff was mind-blowing. Doesn't make it right. Didn't make it valid. Just because it was popular. Just because people thought it was titillating. Doesn't mean anything. It's not very rigorous.
First of all, I'm not sure they did. Yeah.
I think it's a bit...
He said, first of all, I'm not sure they didn't. Then what are you doing, Phil?
Count anybody's orgasms, but how do we approach our children sexually, generally?
Where do we get information if we don't?
Not from sex offenders.
Yeah.
Just because one child had 5 orgasms, how's that reflecting everyone else? I mean, that was just one isolated event.
Besides, what do we call an orgasm?
Sir.
I'm just appalled at Dr. Tripp's whole attitude towards this whole thing. She's throwing accusations at him, and he's just standing there like it was funny or anything like that.
Well, I think it's absolutely hilarious. You talk about a...
No, he's saying, why aren't you defending yourself, Kumar?
Man who's the champion sex researcher. He did very careful work. Everybody just asks irrelevant questions.
This country
has nothing to do with anything.
On the end.
Yeah, C.A. Tripp's like, listen, I can't control this conversation. I can't lead you down the roads I want you to go down and things I want you to see. So this is all just very silly. It's just all very stupid. They're asking questions and saying things that just don't matter. Fucking insane.
Writes for Penthouse. It disturbs me that you talk about positive incest. I don't understand that. That's very disturbing.
Listen, my daughter, Maeve, happened to be the star of an anti-child molestation film. I will not be smeared by this woman, Judith Resiman. I wrote an article based on data. She is afraid of ideas.
Are you there, caller?
Dangerous.
She's not afraid of ideas. She's afraid of negative behaviors. Incest is a unhealthy behavior. It is born out of some sort of mental illness and abuse. It's not a fucking idea.
There's no positive incest.
I got to press the button. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, please.
I really think that this is all about the age-old American fear of sexuality. And what makes it even worse is that if you really think about it and listen to what these people are saying, they're just afraid to admit that there is such a thing as childhood sexuality, that whenever you talk about childhood sexuality, people just freak out. And yet
No, people understand that there's childhood sexuality. Everybody was a child at one point. People know that. They're talking about, creepy, lecherous scientists, quote unquote, studying children in inorganic and disgusting, degenerate ways. That's what we're talking about. It's kind of like what we have a resurgence of this shit going on in today's world. That's why we're talking about this. This is why we're watching this stuff. It's one thing to not agree with it and not like it, but the best thing you can do is make yourself a credible witness against these things by understanding the people that were involved in developing the ideas, developing the work. What were their intentions? What were their biases? What were they trying to achieve? What are they proud of? It's important to know those things. It's important to know their names. It just makes you a better cudgel against it. It just makes you a better tool.
Student of the history of sexuality, and I know there is such a thing. Children do respond to things.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't know much about the Kinsey report, but I'm definitely going to re-up, and I'm not going to buy your book and make you rich.
Well, yeah.
I'd like to know why she has everything to say and the other people are just sitting there.
Well, because they got a lousy moderator who didn't equally distribute
One
the
quick
time.
rhetorical question. Where do they get these children from for these studies?
Yeah.
The children were all taken from...
I would just like to say, regardless of what Judith...
He's trying to answer the question. All the children were taken from. They were taken from wherever those creeps could get them. They weren't down at the Institute.
Says how she feels. They shouldn't keep down her credentials. I didn't hear.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Years ago, our children were brought up under SICAS. Dr. Mary Calderon. Yes. At that time, they were showing a film.
She didn't make it. Her questions did not make it. Okay, so now we've done that. We've watched the Donahue episode. That's Judith Resiman. She does a lot of work fighting against it. She did that for the rest of her life.